Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate that. And it is crazy how that relationship came about. Like, I think back and I was like, and how I met Brian was through another guy named Bo, who who we filmed at the abortion clinic in Tennessee the very day that the abortion clinic closed. And I looked across the street and I saw the Satanic Temple across from the abortion clinic, and I said, "You didn't win. You didn't win." And this guy Bo, and he's so American, and he's like, "How y'all doing?" And so this is how we all met. So God orchestrated every single thing that happened with this film, and how I'm here like right now. So I don't have a PowerPoint, okay? Because I'll tell you why. I'm lazy, but I. I also put too many videos in my PowerPoints, and so when I do that, like, it's pointless. It's just video. So I was like, well, that seems kind of boring. I'm not saying that anything was boring here today. I'm just saying that. But mine are boring. They like cartoon characters and smiley faces, and you won't like it. So thank you guys for having me here. And I want to say this is like coming home, because I used to live in Abbotsford. I know. See, now I'm one of these guys now, right? I'm not even a newfie. Newfoundland. Say it with me, Newfoundland. But I moved to Abbotsford. Okay, I have to tell you the backhand story because this is going to be like really quick. But maybe I'll speak Newfie, and then someone can interpretate. So I should have been aborted. My mother got pregnant with me when she was only 15. And she came from a generation where they took responsibility. Now, I'm not that old. I'm only 48, and my mom had me very young. So she decided to keep me, and I was in my parents' wedding picture because my mom was 7 months pregnant with me. She got married on her 16th birthday. I still can't believe that, but she did. So she decided to keep me, and here I am. I don't have an abortion story. I don't have anything that's just, oh, that's terrible. I grew up like a Canadian average kid. So my mom had me, and by the time she was 20 years old, she had 3 girls, and decided to raise them all, got married. Now, my parents weren't the most wonderful couple, let's be honest. Their marriage was really bad, but for some reason they stuck it out. And when I was 7 years old, they made the decision to move to Abbotsford. It was a weird thing. We got on a Via Rail train right across Canada, 5 days, and ended up in Mission, and then moved into Abbotsford. So I think this is a land of honey, honestly. You guys are so lucky, you don't even know. And so I spent 5.5 years in Abbotsford, and I have to say, most of my childhood memories are here, and I love this place. I live in Alberta, but I come back to BC almost every year. My husband's back here. I've taken him here, and he just thinks this is the greatest place ever, so we love it. So in those 5 years, my parents and a local church started a church plant in Desroches. You guys familiar with the Indigenous population there? And so I was taught very young how to be a good Christian child. And at home, my parents, like I said, had a terrible marriage, and it was just chaos for me, right? Then at the age of 13, my mom decided that we were going back to Newfoundland. So I cried holy war. I'm like, I'm not going. I'm not going. I'm going to stay in Abbotsford. I love it. I even begged her to let me stay with her friends. Like, that's how bad. I'm desperate at this point, right? She's like, no, we got to go back. Our family's there. We go back to Newfoundland, and I protested for 1 year. Okay, so this is where I started my protest. This is what I think. I wore black, and I refused to talk to anybody almost for a whole year. I was dedicated, okay? I'm going back to Abbotsford. This is where my life is. Didn't work. So then I had to sort of just, conform to the culture in Newfoundland, which was very hard, I have to say, when you've been out and come back in. So I said to my mom, when I'm 18, I'm going back to Abbotsford, just so you know. Oh, she's like, sure you will, sure you will. I'm like, no, I'm really going to do it. So when I was 18, I did not make it to Abbotsford. I made it to Edmonton. And it was supposed to be short term, just saying. It's a good spot. It's not bad. But then I found myself in the same situation as my mom, pregnant. I didn't want to be a mom. I didn't want to get married. I wanted to travel the world and be free. Because I was like, it just didn't look that appealing compared to what my parents were doing, right? So I no, I don't want to be a mom. And I have to say, I was pretty begrudging towards the entire pregnancy. I was not a happy camper. I didn't want to have a baby. I didn't even know how to take care of a baby. I didn't know how to take care of myself. So I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And the reason why I'm telling you this whole story, because you have to know that, I am the least person who should be standing here right now. I should not be doing films. I should not be in a pro-life ministry. It's weird because I didn't care about any of that. I walked away from God and I didn't go to church. And I said, I'm just sort of done with all of that, right? So I have this baby. He's born prematurely. And I'm lying in the hospital room and I'm like, when are they going to bring me this kid, I want to see him. And so they brought him into me. I only got to see him for about half an hour. And I will say, instantaneously, everything changed that moment. They placed him in my arms. And I think a lot of women who have abortions don't ever get to experience that because a lot of times this is their first pregnancy. And I think if they did, they would never do it again. And I said, oh my gosh, someone could come and give me, I'm 19, right? I don't know anything. Someone could give me $1 million and I wouldn't give this child to anybody. I'm so committed. And that was the love that I had for my son. And so since then I had 2 more kids and they're all grown and I'm still a young mom, but my daughter's 21 and my oldest is 28. So, and there's one in the middle. So, fast forward to, I would say 10 years, 12 years down the road, I really didn't go to church much. Kids got a certain age, I thought, well, maybe I should bring them to church, maybe I should take them. I really like to party. I'm a newfie. That's what we do. We're there. That's what we party. There's not much else to do there. So, mostly. And so I'm in this lifestyle of just going out and partying. I still took care of my kids very well, but I just didn't care. I ended up going back to church. And I will tell you, I rededicated my life to God and got baptized. I never, ever heard a pastor talk about pro-life. I never heard a pastor say we should stand outside an abortion clinic. I didn't even know there was an abortion clinic in my city. I did not know much about abortion. And the only thing that I can say that I remember about abortion before this time was when I was 16 years old, there was this show, and some of you will probably remember, it was called Degrassi High. Remember Degrassi High? Oh, God, I love that show. I couldn't wait every week. I was just like, oh, it's coming on. It actually depicted the culture of Canada, right? And nobody's talking about the real issues, including the church. And I was going to church with my parents, and I never heard a pastor say that. I even went to a Pentecostal school. And all I ever heard was, don't get pregnant. Don't get pregnant. It was never nothing on the real issues. But Degrassi High had the issues. So I'm going to play the clip because I don't want to bore you guys to tears with my life story, but I'm going to show you what I grew up and this is where I got my information and my education about abortion. And pastors didn't teach me, teachers didn't teach me, my parents didn't. My mom's like, just don't get pregnant, That's all she said to me. She didn't say anything else. And so when you watch this clip, you'll see how that was the education system we had on abortion in Canada. And I remember thinking to myself when I saw this whole clip, and there was 2 twin girls on the show, Erica and Heather, and one of them ended up finding themselves with an unwanted pregnancy. And when I found out that you could kill an innocent child, I was like, that can't be right. Somebody has got to do something. We can't allow this in Canada. And I was like, well, everything happens in Toronto anyway. And we think that in Newfoundland, we think everything happens everywhere else, right? And so I want to play the clip just for you to get an insight of the education that I got at 16 years old.
What about abortion?
That's a hot topic. It's in the news a lot these days. Did you know there are protesters down in Gerrard Street right this very minute? Who has an opinion?
Abortion's wrong. It's like murder. It is not.
Please, if you have something to say, raise your hand.
hasn't even been born yet, so how can it be like murder? It's a fetus. I mean, it's no more a baby than an acorn is an oak tree.
What's a tree got to do with it? It's a baby, a little person. What about the baby's rights?
Once again, okay, it's not a baby. It can't talk or think. I mean, it can't even feel.
Well, in our church, abortion's wrong.
Excuse me, but what right does any church have to say what a woman can and can't do with her own body?
Exactly.
What about the rights of the woman?
What about the people who want to have children, but can't? I mean, wouldn't it be better if the babies were allowed to live and then they could adopt them?
So women are just baby factories? Incubators without rights? What if the woman doesn't want to have the baby? Maybe she was raped. Or maybe she got pregnant by accident. Is it right to force her to keep the fetus? I mean, you're denying her choice.
I just know if I had an abortion. Yeah, baby, tell her.
Just because I had Emma doesn't mean I know it's right.
Having a baby might kill the mother. I mean, isn't one abortion better than both of them dying?
But isn't abortion dangerous?
Yeah. We know a woman who had an abortion. And she can't have kids.
If it's done properly, having an abortion is safer than having a baby.
Yeah, using abortion for birth control. Oops, I'm pregnant. Just get rid of it. Talk about killers.
How can you have so much compassion for something that hasn't even been born yet?
What if you got pregnant by accident?
Okay, people, settle down. Over in the back.
Some people think that human life starts when the child is conceived. They say it produces blood at about 20 days and there's a heartbeat around 24 days. Blood and a heartbeat, that's at least partly human. I don't think it's right to kill
How can you have that?
You're not going to disagree with those facts. What if they're right? What if they're
People,
wrong?
please calm down.
If abortion was against the law, then people would do
Okay, so this girl, she goes on to have an abortion. And they show the clinic when she was walking into the clinic, and there was protesters all outside, and they're yelling and screaming at her that she's a murderer and that she's got a little, they're showing her little baby, what it looks like, and she does it anyway. And after, long story short, I don't know if you've seen this, but she has nightmares, and she's screaming at night because she can hear her baby crying. And that's the trauma that happens. The abortion doesn't end the trauma, regardless of how the conception happened. And so I think about this and I think, if we could have had this discussions in church or in school, like we didn't get it, I was in a Pentecostal school and they never talked about this, how different my outlook could have been about abortion in general or just life in general. But we never had any of that. And I don't know why we didn't talk about it. I don't know why my pastor didn't say, hey, this is a life issue. And a life issue is not just about abortion. It's 0 to 100, right? Right now in Canada, we got some pretty crazy stuff that happened with the Maid Law. And probably most of you already know what the Maid Law is and what's happening. So Grassy's over, I move away, I'm an adult, right? So I have 3 kids, we're going to church, so I'm on the journey of how we got here. And I'm in church, but I'm not really connected, you know? I'm just sort of flying by the seat of my pants. Unfortunately, my marriage came to an end. Not by my fault, by the way. And my life just completely changed. And this is how God works, and you least expect it. And I don't know why God picked me. I don't know why he chose me in any aspect. I'm pretty argumentative. I'm not, always the easiest person to get along with. And one day, me and my daughter were sitting at a cafe, Remedy Cafe, I'll never forget it. And we were having coffee, and I looked at the window and I seen hundreds of people walking down Jasper Avenue, which is the main drag in Edmonton. And they're all carrying signs. And I'm like, I wonder what these people are doing, because I'm so nosy, I gotta know everything, So I stood up and I said, I wonder what they're doing. And this guy's like, oh, that's those crazy people. They're trying to take women's rights away. They're the pro-lifers. They want to take the rights of women away. I was like, there's a pro-life place in Edmonton? Like, I had no even idea, right? So I was like, well, I should go out and see what they're doing. So me and my daughter literally ran out into the street. I grabbed the first lady I saw. I'll never forget. Her name is Donna. I'm like, Donna, what's going on? What are you doing? And she's like, oh, we're marching for life. She explains the entire thing to me. I was like, there's a pro-life place in Edmonton. And she's like, yeah, you interested? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll go. Well, next week we're having a board meeting. You should come. She gives me the information, and she just goes on. So I went, and I was on the board of directors that night. I don't know why. I wasn't really into it first. I was like, you know, like you know when you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to do this because this is my obligation in life. But I started on the board of directors, and as I started to really realize the implications of abortion in life, my whole mindset changed. And then all of a sudden, there's this fire that kind of burned inside of me that I was like, I have to change this. And it wasn't just like overnight, it wasn't just like that moment. I didn't have a burning bush moment, let me tell you. But I did have the moment where I'm like, I can't go back now. Like, I really, So I met my husband. He's an American, so we're Americanos. And I was in the U.S. Back and forth a couple times. And one night we had a fundraiser in Edmonton. And the board of directors asked me if I would go represent Edmonton Pro-Life. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I was just not really, They're like, you need to do this because we have nobody else and you're it. And you have to go. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll go. So I went and I set up a booth and I was just smiling at everybody and, and everything. And I sat down at the table for the meal and I sat next to Cam Cote. I don't know if anybody knows him from Life Canada. And Drew Martin, who owns Mighty Motion Pictures. Now, God planned that, let me tell you. 2 of them offered me a job that night. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll meet for coffee or something, And then Abby came out, and I met Abby that night, too. And she told the Unplanned story before Unplanned ever came out. And I was like, well, that can't be for real. Like, this woman's for real. So I didn't take the job from Cam Cote, by the way. Just saying, I'm with Mighty Motion Pictures. But I left there, and I remember calling my husband, and I was like, there's this lady from Planned Parenthood who was like instrumental in helping with 21,000 abortions, and now she's a pro-life leader. He's like, I think I heard about her. I was like, oh yeah, I never ever heard about her. And I said her story was compelling, and I was like, this is just amazing. And then I went to Illinois, and about a month later, Unplanned, this was time, right? Time went on. Unplanned premiered in the United States, and him and I decided to go see it. And I know this story, but I will tell you the beginning of the film, like most of you know who've seen it, the first part of the film is gut-wrenching. And I was like, I already know the story, but still this really bothered me, right? And only about 30 people actually came to the premiere, so I was like, well, this movie's not going to be that popular, And but it was amazing. It was truly amazing. And I walked out of there, and I remember me and my husband, we looked around, and there was 2 circles of people holding hands outside the theater. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, well, we're praying for this film, that it's going to go further. And apparently, there's been groups all over the United States that were doing that. And guess what happened? Well, Unplanned went further. It went so further, it's worldwide. I come back to Edmonton, and we got the rights to premiere it in Edmonton. First night it premiered in Edmonton, 3,000 people came. And I've only been in 2 places in my life where you could not hear a pin drop in a place. And this was the second. The movie was, how can you sit in a room with 3,000 people and it was just dead silence, right? I think everybody was sort of in shock. And that night happened to be my birthday, 50 years in Canada that abortion had been legal. So now I know God's calling me. He's got me here. This was a reason. So fast forward, I end up taking the position as the director of Edmonton Pro-Life and work through COVID. Now, all of you knew that was fun. Yeah, that was something, let me tell you. Nobody's coming out to anything. And I'm like, wow, this movement is going nowhere fast. And I was very disappointed in the pro-life community at the time, because even despite everything that they had believed and saw, I just thought, we're going to still stand for life because the abortion clinic is still open. Didn't happen. Nobody would come out to anything. And I remember sitting in the office And I was thinking to myself, God, if I stay in this position, all I'm going to be is a brochure pusher. All I'm going to do is push out information to people, but I'm not really going to do anything. And that's what I felt personally. Fast forward a couple months after, we decided, me and the board, to part ways. And I was without a job. I was unemployed for about 6 weeks. So I was like, what am I going to do now? I'm going to clean my office and get motivated, clean my office at home. And when I did, I kid you not, and this is a God moment, there was a business card that sort of flew up in the air, hit the floor. God's coming for me, I'm telling you now. He's coming for me. So I can do nothing. And I pick up the card, and it was Drew Martin's card. And he had asked me after that initial Abby Johnson fundraiser many times to have coffee with him, and I wouldn't. And I looked at the card, I said, well, maybe I should have coffee with him. I said to my husband, should I have coffee with him? Yeah, you should. So I call him up, and I said, hey, Drew, what are you doing? What's up? What's going on? He's like, well, I'm in the midst of looking for a producer for a film that I'm doing with Abby Johnson. I'm like, oh, you're doing an Abby Johnson film? I think maybe we should talk. I said, because I'm unemployed right now, and I'm trying to find a direction what I'm doing. So he comes to my house, 4 hours. Me and Drew Martin are talking, okay? And he hired me as the film producer. So God orchestrated every step, even some of my begrudging steps, because I wasn't always that great about it, into this position. And then when I got the position and I started to work, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, this is what I was supposed to do. The fire for me to stand up for life is so great. I couldn't walk away right now if I even tried. And I've been all over the country. I've met thousands of people, and I am truly in awe of who God brought into my life through all of that, including you guys, because that's part of it, right? So I'm going to show you guys the promo in a couple minutes, but I really wanted to talk to you guys as a church, or if you're in any kind of leadership here, why it matters to us as Christians and the church community to be pro-life and to listen to God when he tells you this is what you need to do. Now, I wasn't like just getting, okay, God, I'm going to do whatever you want. I was just kind of thinking he was going to put me in this gravy job, right? And I'm going to be everything's going to be peachy. Nothing about being a pro-lifer in Canada is peachy, let me tell you. It is spiritual warfare on another level. And when I started in the pro-life movement, my life crashed. And I can't tell you all the personal things, but it was attack after attack after attack. Even working on this film, we had that many spiritual attacks. I'm almost in awe, but because the devil doesn't want us to do this. He wants us to sit back and let the death culture in Canada just keep going. And it is. I mean, we are in trouble. And when I'm in the US and people ask me, is that really truly happening in Canada? I'm like, yeah, it is. It's really a thing. And and I can't say we all got here going, okay, it's no big deal. But I don't think we were aware of the process happening behind closed doors, right? But I think when I look back at that clip and I'm thinking, there was a Canadian film company making this awareness happen. I don't know if they were Christians. It didn't seem like it because the rest of the series was not Christian, let me tell you. And how come we didn't step up to the plate and go, we can't allow this to go on? And we have. So we are one of 3 countries in the world that has no abortion laws. Does anybody know what the other 2 are? China and North Korea. So we're aligned with communism. Truly, we are. We're aligned with communism. So there's some facts that I want you guys to know about abortion, which are stunning. And most people don't know. When I was the director in Edmonton, I did this campaign called Did You Know? And because of all the censorship, I was never allowed to put out any gruesome advertising or anything like that. So it had to be very black and white. So I tried to put out a campaign that said, Did you know? Basic black and white facts on a board that said, did you know in Canada we can have abortion up to 9 months? They turned me down. So Kelowna Pro-Life called me up and said, I heard about your campaign. Can we take it? I'm like, sure you can. And they did. and they were extremely successful with this campaign. But I want just some facts for you to know, if you don't know. Most people don't. But that we have about 100,000 abortions in Canada every year. And we have, 38,000 or 38 million people in Canada. I think that's our population, roughly. So 100,000 of us lose our life, or 100,000 members don't get a chance to live in Canada. 200,000 abortions a day around the world. There is a website called worldmeter.info. If you put that in your phone, it will show you live how many abortions are happening every second. It is, me and my husband were looking last night at, was midnight, it was 18,732,000 abortions, and the clock kept moving and it kept increasing every second. So yearly in the world, largest cause of death, 73 million. So we have a genocide. 73 million people are not born a year just from abortion. Stats are hard. That's hard stats. And most people have no idea that that's where we're at. And in Canada, it's very difficult to find a doctor to do a third-term abortion. It is. It's expensive, like she was talking about earlier. And there's a doctor in Boulder, Colorado, that our government will pay for you to go to, send you on a plane, $18,000 American, it costs us taxpayers. And they will kill your baby at full-term abortion even the day before birth. And we have no choice but to pay for that. We have no say. We just have to pay for it. And we have to pay for the abortions. And Abby came across some documentation of a woman who actually did this abortion when she was cleaning out her office. Man, we gotta stop cleaning out our offices because we're coming across all kinds of stuff. So she has proof this stuff is going on. We already know what's going on, but she had actual proof that it happened. So she said that, I think she made it public on her socials. But so anyway, that's some statistics that are hard statistics to really grasp. But if you watch that world meter, it's almost insane. You know, it's like the world clock where it's like deaths and life and stuff. But this is just abortion. This is nothing else. And it's astonishing. And guess what? Our beautiful Trudeau government sends money to all these countries to pay for those abortions, by the way. $22 million goes to Africa alone. We've got people sleeping on the streets here, and we've got $22 million going for abortions in Africa. It's a hard pill to swallow. So a couple weeks ago, we were in Ottawa. We screened the film Unthinkable, which is completed. It was a private screening. And I was sitting next to my husband, and there was a part of the film which I had already watched so many times, but when it comes live on the big screen, you pay a little bit more attention. And back up to when we first started filming, we filmed in Austin, Texas. Abby has a retreat every year because she has a pro-life ministry that takes workers out of the abortion industry, helps them heal, helps them get a job. And we met about 40 of them on set. We got to film a lot of them. We got to meet them. It was amazing. And, you know, I've been doing this for a little while, so you think I'd be tough girl, right? And it was 45 degrees something, and it was a combination of that heat in Austin, oh my goodness, and just them speaking about such deep issues and things that they were involved in. And there's one lady there, and when you get to see the screening of the film, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And she worked with Dr. Gosnell, who's now in jail, and she told some of the story of what she had seen and what she had been a part of. And I think you'd have to be almost insane to admit some of this if it wasn't true. And I got so choked up on the set, I had to walk off and go to the bathroom, and I felt like I was going to throw up. And I was like, this can't be a thing. Nobody could do these things. It just, you know. So it took me a little while, cleared my head, went back on set. But when I was in Ottawa a couple weeks ago, and we were there, and that part of the film came up, all of a sudden, I'm in tears again. I cannot believe that this is true. And It's a hard pill to swallow for somebody to go on camera and say, I was looking for a jar big enough to put a baby in and stuff it down. And it's hard for me to say it, but they didn't have a jar big enough for this child because it was so late term to stuff the parts in. And the way that she described it, you think about your own children and how when they were born, they're these little beings and they're so innocent. And people are stuffing human beings in jars. So this movie is very controversial and it will stir a lot. It's a whistleblowing. It's a lot of behind the evil doors of Planned Parenthood. But in saying that, it's also a redemption story of like how these workers were able to transform their lives and getting to know them over this last couple years and seeing them have ministries that have completely saved children and women's lives is insanely wonderful to look at. But I want to share one more story with you before I showed you the promo that really got me, because you guys were talking about being outside the abortion clinics. Now in Edmonton, we have this thing called the bubble zone outside abortion clinics. I think it's 250 feet or something like that. Now, I didn't really care about that law because I just took my big blue Jeep and parked right next to the abortion clinic. And I just like to watch who's going in there and the demographic of what's happening. And I see kids coming out, 14 years old, and, mom's in the car and doing this, and the girl's crying, and I know her life is going to be devastated. But one day, I was sitting there, and I was having a coffee, and all of a sudden, the biohazard truck pulled up. And I was like, man, this is like unplanned, in the film, the biohazard comes, right? And I said, wow, this is for real, like this. And I sat there, and all of a sudden I started crying because I was like, they're taking human children away in these containers. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was so bothered. I even made a little TikTok video about it. I'm like, how can we allow this to happen? I mean, it's not that I wanted to cry on camera or anything, but it just bothered me so much. So they left, and I was just sitting there kind of staring in space for a couple minutes, and then I finally left. And the next week I was talking to Abby, and I said, Abby, I need to know something. I know in Unplanned you talked about the biohazard, it was in the story, but can you tell me what happens after? Because I want to know. I don't know if any of you guys are ready for this, but she says, well, it's hard to imagine, but those babies, fetuses, what we call them, is sent to Minnesota, and it's turned into fuel. And I said, fuel? Yep. And some of these factories are fueled by children. And I was kind of stunned, and she says, it's hard to think about. I said, and I told her I was sitting out the side of the clinic, and she says, yep, and that's the reality, and people don't know. And I said, so we're like Germany all over again. Here we are. And she said, yeah, here we are. And I couldn't believe that, and I've told so many people since. And the reason why, it's heartbreaking to hear that, right? To know that children are turning into fuel. And also she said they were put into a lot of the vaccines, and that's why she refuses to take vaccines. In the majority, she said, majority. And when you think about 1 million abortions in the US alone, and that biohazard, so to say, is turned into fuel, that's just, I can't live with that. I can't live with that. So I know that I can never back down from the abortion issue or the life issue in general. I have to make a stand as a Christian. I have to make a stand as someone who's been a mom, and I'm still a mom though, even though they're grown, even though they don't think I'm a mom, but I'm still the mom. And just how that whole process happened, someone who didn't want to be a mom, who started out. I was no different than most Canadian kids, right? They're growing up, but I had different dreams, right? But God made me a mother, I think, to humble me in a lot of ways, and to make me unselfish. And as I was as a teenager and protesting against moving, it's crazy. But these are real things that are happening, and just because it happens behind a curtain in a building doesn't mean it's not happening. And the majority of Canadians will usually think that abortions are done in the hospital, and they're not. Most of them are done in the clinics, and they're all over Canada. And but I had an opportunity to sit with one of the pastors in Edmonton and talk to him about abortion and ask him why he never spoke about abortion. He says, well, it's not something I really think about. And I said, well, can you imagine driving down that street the abortion clinic's on and seeing about 10 babies sitting out there and someone's axing them to pieces? What were you going to do? What would you do? And he said, well, I'd go crazy. I'd call the police. I'm like, that's happening inside. It's no different. And he said, well, I never thought about it like that. So I think our problem is the education of leaders. And this is why this ministry, starting here, which is so refreshing, as I told Brian in DC, I said, I have to see it to believe it, that I could find a church that's pro-life. Because when me and my husband were serving in the pro-life ministry and community, him and I contacted almost 600 churches, I think, honey. It was almost 600 churches in the Edmonton and surrounding areas. And guess how much response we got? Now, we weren't asking for money. We were just saying, hey, we'd like to go in and just talk and say, hey, be a part of what we're doing. Guess how many people responded? One church. And guess what they did? They sent me a check, and then they unsubscribed. Yeah. So when Brian's saying, oh, no, I got a guy, I got a church, I'm like, well, I'll hold my beer, see what happens. So when I'm talking to Jeff, I'm like, this guy's for real. He's really into this. And I'm like, well, how many people do you have in your church? And then so then he was telling me about this conference, and I was like, oh, I'll just come because I have to see it, right? So I did believe you, honestly. I really did. But it was refreshing to finally see somebody stand up and say, enough is enough, and this is what we're going to stand for. And being a part of that, their ministry is amazing. And so I really want to encourage you to support that ministry. And also this film. So this film will most likely not be screened in Canada in the theaters unless somebody wants to rent it at a theater, just because of our wonderful government and its censorship laws. It is rated R, and we have no choice but to rate it R, just because of the contents. They won't let us do anything else. You have to go through a lot of hoops to get PG, let me tell you. And so we're asking churches and organizations to screen it just like they did on Unplanned. Rent out a venue and let's do it. Because I think, and I would love to see more leaders step up to the plate and watch this so they can be aware of some of those things. And I will tell you, when we were in Ottawa screening, there was tears to the theater, including my own, and I was directly involved with every step of the way. And so if it affects me that deeply, and I should be desensitized, right? Because I've seen all this stuff, and but I'm not, because it's the heart of God to say, this is murder. You're murdering my innocent children. So you should be affected. So we're going to play the promo, and then I guess we'll answer some questions after. So I don't mean to make it really heavy, but just so you know, it's not in the promo, but parts of the film are quite heavy like that. So thank you guys, and we'll show the promo.
Percent of women committing abortions identify themselves as either Protestant or Catholic. That's 650,000 abortions each year obtained by Christians in the United States. Church, we have work to do. The fight to make abortion unthinkable is ours. I've been working on a feature-length documentary called Unthinkable that exposes the darkest depths of the abortion industry. This fall, we plan to release this film that will completely uncover the depravity of every square inch of the abortion business, reveal every dirty secret, like the secrets within this Planned Parenthood facility behind me, and appeal to the fierce mercy of God for these crimes against him and humanity.
Time is money in the abortion industry. We did not want a woman on the table longer than 5 minutes.
We took videos at the beginning of clinic, and we would play music, and the doctor would come in and dance to the Rocky theme. Like, we're gonna get this done today.
Myra's done, so you just need... Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, to eliminate the African American population through widespread access to abortion and contraception.
That is literally the #1 killer into the black race. It was just like a genocide.
There's so many times that people say, well, Abby, that was just your experience at your one clinic. And I thought, well, okay, maybe, but why don't we get a whole bunch of us together and see if that's really true?
So she called that night to the answering service that she was bleeding, but the doctor never answered. She ended up dying.
The woman asked, is it killing? And the clinic director, she said, oh, if you think killing a fly is killing, everything about it is dehumanizing.
We had one woman that she tried to flush her own baby down the toilet, and its head got stuck.
And we're ready to share everything we were told would be too much for public audiences. The truth is never too much.
Clamp the head to make it come out. And you'll see all the insides gush out.
You know, is there anything that you look back on that you say, I don't know that was right, looking back on it now?
The protocol in counseling is if there is a fetus born alive in that building, we are to administer CPR. That was untrue because I've witnessed a fetus being born alive in that building.
What do they do?
Drown in the toilet.
This is not new. This has been going on for thousands of years. We just call it something different.
We call it something different. And again, you know, it's not that a person is worshiping the devil necessarily when they're promoting abortion. But they don't have to be thinking of him, and he doesn't care whether or not they're thinking of him. A sacrifice, think of what a sacrifice is. I'm going to give something up in order to get something back.
But our fight is with a spiritual battle, and our weapon is the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 describes the fruit. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. Not your typical weapons.
Unthinkable needs to be seen by everyone who advocates for abortion, but we need your help to make a widespread release of this film possible by contributing financially or becoming an investor. Visit unthinkabledoc.com for more information about how you can partner with us.